Ballingstad, Sweden. Just outside this small town, located 40 miles northwest of Stockholm, is an ancient carved granite block. Known as the Buxta runestone, it is one of the few remaining relics that depict the mighty god Odin holding his magical spear. Gungnir.
The Buxta runestone is an extraordinary ancient relic that has runic inscriptions which were used by the Vikings. It shows Odin riding on a horseback with a spear.
So one of the things we find with the Norse gods is they each have remarkable possessions, and among those is a spear that Odin claims for himself called Gungnir. And Gungnir is a remarkable spear in that whatever you throw it at, it's going to hit.
According to Viking or Norse mythology, Odin's spear was made by the sons of Ivaldi, the very same creatures who built the ship Skidbladnir. They imbued the spear with special properties that not only made it incredibly accurate, but gave it immense power.
Gungnir was some kind of high-tech weapon. No matter who he threw it at, it would hit it. Like some laser-guided cruise missile or something like that. That just simply could not miss its mark once it had been set to its target.
And we know that when he uses this in war, it always reaches its target. This is not something which is simplistic. This is something which clearly is advanced weaponry. And to find that a deity has this at his disposal can be read in two things. One, it is all made up, or two, it is actually factual. And today we know that there are such weapons.
Precision weapons like laser-guided bombs, cruise missiles, and satellite-guided munitions are staples in the world's most sophisticated military arsenals. Is it possible that Odin possessed similar technology? Could Gungnir actually have been a guided missile created by otherworldly beings?
When the ancients are describing technology, it's clear that they couldn't have known exactly what this was. And it opens the question, is it possible that the weapon Gungnir was an actual advanced technology, maybe even possessed by the Vikings or their gods?
If Gungnir was in fact a precision-guided missile, similar to today's so-called smart bombs, then what might be the facts behind Thor's mighty hammer, Mjolnir?
Thor's hammer had interesting origins. It was made by dwarves under duress. So the handle wasn't quite as long as a hammer might be, but it was enormously powerful. It had great accuracy. He could throw it, and it would hit anything that he intended it to hit, and then it would come back to him almost in boomerang style.
But Thor's hammer, like the weapons of many of the Norse gods, would seem to be some high-tech, real weapon, perhaps one given to them by extraterrestrials.
And when he uses it, it is actually said that this weapon is able to crush mountains. Now imagine a weapon which is able to destroy an entire mountain. The hammer does not cause explosions. It is really the physical force which destroys the object. And that is something which today we describe as kinetic weapons.
Over 1,000 miles north of Karnak lies Scandinavia, home to an ancient people called the Norse. The Norse were tribal Germanic people who lived in what is now known as Sweden, Denmark, Iceland, and Norway. Norse legends record the triumphs of great warriors with advanced weaponry, sophisticated combat techniques, and navigational prowess. Like the Greeks, Norse mythology includes supernatural beings, other worlds, and powerful gods. But like the Romans, could the Norse myths refer not to different gods, but the same gods as those depicted by the ancient Greeks?
There are a number of similarities between Greek mythology and Norse mythology, and many of the gods are almost identical, and they do much the same thing.
Descriptions of the Viking god Odin, the god of war, death, and knowledge, and the Greek god Zeus bear striking similarities.
Zeus and Odin are both sky father gods. They travel through the skies in chariots because they are akin to the solar divinities. The precursor to many religious beliefs is sun worship. The ancients knew that life came from the sun. So that is a great mystery and a source of great awe.
What you're getting there is not just some minor deity, but you really are nailing it down to one of the chief deities. This is a very important character. And so whoever is behind Odin or Zeus is obviously a person or a divine entity which is shared by these cultures. And it's clear that whoever inspired the myth of Zeus or Odin is somehow somebody who had an extremely important contribution to make to both civilizations. So this entity was definitely known throughout Europe.
Ancient alien theorists also point to similarities between the sophisticated weapons possessed by both the Norse and the Greek gods. Among Odin's weapons was a spear that never missed its target. The Norse god Thor, god of storms, strength, and fertility, wielded a powerful hammer.
Right there we have a correlation, a connection, because not only does Zeus have the thunderbolt, but what does Odin have and Thor? They have a hammer. Thor has a hammer with which he can smash things, destroy things, and, you know, the hammer idea is pretty close with the description to the lightning rod that Zeus has.
So you have to wonder if these tales of Zeus's thunderbolts, Thor's hammer, if these weren't real weapons, just like we have today, where we have directed energy beam weapons or are developing some kind of literal thunderbolt coming out of a spacecraft.
Lindisfarne, England, 793 AD. Several hundred Viking raiders make landfall on this small tidal island off the coast of Northumbria to plunder a great monastery of its rumored treasures. An account of the attack on Lindisfarne says the assault coincided with extraordinary whirlwinds, lightning, and fiery dragons crisscrossing the skies. Could these strange events be coincidence? Or could it be evidence that otherworldly forces may have been allied with the Vikings? Ancient astronaut theorists believe the answer can be found by examining the divine beings that form the basis of Norse religion and mythology.
The Norse gods were worshipped over a very wide range of time and space throughout Northern Europe, from the continental German lands, through the British Islands, the far northern islands such as Iceland and Greenland, and all throughout Scandinavia.
Because little information has survived related to the origin of the Norse or Viking gods, modern scholars depend on a pair of Icelandic books written several hundred years after the Viking Age, called the Eddas.
And so we find that there's the god Odin, the god Frey, the god Thor. Those are probably the best known, but there are a bunch of other supporting gods who flesh out this mythology. The gods live in a world of their own, but it's closely connected to the world of men.
The Norse had some of the richest descriptions and references to the cosmos. In fact, they referred to the cosmos as Yggdrasil, meaning the tree of life. That was the symbol of their idea of the cosmos. And they were very specific in stating that their cosmos contained 9 different worlds, one of which is ours, the Earth.
We often hear about the 9 worlds of the Nordic mythological realm. There's Asgard, and that's the home of the gods Thor and Odin. There's the world of humans. We call this Middle Earth or Midgard. If we go step a little bit further outside of Asgard and Midgard, we confront Jotunheim, or the land of the giants. We'll encounter Muspel, which is an area of fire. We'll encounter Niflheim, which is another world where the frost ogres live. We'll encounter Alfheim, which is where the elves live.
According to the Eddas, Asgard was home to the most powerful of the gods. It is described as a beautiful and peaceful realm, full of glimmering halls and fertile fields cut by shimmering rivers.
Odin is the chief of the gods. He lives in the highest of the heavens, Asgard. He had one eye. He had given up an eye to drink of the water of truth. And so he has this depth of wisdom. So he's a warrior god, able to bring fury and danger to the enemies.
Odin was the god that gave people written language in the runes. He was the god that gave them the poetic mead. He was the god that gave them many aspects of what would be considered a sort of noble way of life.
But was Odin perhaps something other than a mythical deity? Could he have actually existed? And if so, how? Ancient astronaut theorists believe clues to Odin's true identity may lie in the myths describing his 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin.
Odin's ravens were his scouts. They were his research team. Hugin and Munin represent thought and memory. So Odin had these scouts, these spy satellites that would go out and see what he needed to learn for today's activities.
According to Norse legends, every morning Odin sent out his 2 magical ravens, Hugin and Munin, and at night those ravens would return and he would listen to them and they would tell him everything that they observed throughout the entire day.
Scholars believe Odin's 2 ravens, translated as thought and memory, were simply mythological creations. But is it possible that Hugin and Munin were actually something else, something perhaps more technological?
Whenever he wanted to observe other worlds, find out what they were doing, he would send these 2 ravens out, and they would be like spy drones or something, and they would go to these other countries and then come back to Odin and report to him what was going on. And it would seem like what Odin had was some kind of spy planes or spy drones that he was sending out, much as we do today.
And the question is whether the Norse really stated that these were ravens, or whether they were instead something else, that they were somehow flying objects. So we have details here of something mythical, of ravens being able to speak to the gods, or the ravens as some kind of spy drone or some other kind of spy satellite technology by which Odin is able to get information.
Could it be that Odin was actually an extraterrestrial explorer, one who sent flying machines, like modern-day drones, to gather intelligence on the ancient Scandinavians? And if so, might there be more evidence of Odin's otherworldly technology contained within other Viking myths?
When Odin sits in Asgard, it's almost like he's got total situational awareness. He's got these ravens who fly out every day and come back and tell him the news of the world, but he can also sit in this high seat.
Odin's high seat, which is a name that basically translates as the Watchtower, is a place where he can sit and look out over all the worlds of creation and see everything that's happening in the world.
Is it possible that this high seat, or watchtower, is yet another example of advanced extraterrestrial technology, as ancient astronaut theorists suggest.
Some of these stories that come out of our past of the god Odin and having the ability to actually sit above Midgard or the Earth and see everything from a vast distance. We have to wonder if this isn't actually mythological, but potentially technological. It sounds to me as if Odin was sitting in some type of a captain's chair in a spaceship above the Earth, which allowed him to have this view.
So the moment we have stories of gods needing all this type of equipment in order to find out first what is going on, leads me to think that we are not talking about actual gods, but we are talking about space travelers who had access to technology, and our ancestors witnessed all of this and they said, well, obviously, these guys are gods. Norse mythology is filled with a concept that I refer to as misunderstood technology. In Norse mythology, we have stories of Odin, the highest god, for example, with his 8-legged horse Sleipnir. That was a celestial horse that flew across the sky, leaving behind a trail of fire. We all know that horses do not have 8 legs, and we also know that horses do not fly across the sky, leaving behind a fiery trail. So why do we have these stories? The pantheon of gods were advanced space travelers that our ancestors witnessed and thought, wow, they have to be gods because they just descended from the sky.
Odin, the god of the dead and the god of warfare, interacted often with humans in the Norse stories. It is also written that from his magical throne, called Hlidskjalf, he could observe all 9 realms.
Hlidskjalf sits at the top of this great tree called Yggdrasil, and Odin can look down on all of creation and see what's happening.
He could see everything. He could hear everything as well. It makes you wonder if this magic watchtower is an advanced alien technology.
Another prominent figure in Norse mythology was Frey, the god of fertility. Frey possessed the most incredible ship in all of the 9 realms.
Frey had an interesting device. It was a ship. And this ship was so big that you could put all of the Norse deities in it and all their weapons. And then you could fold it up, sort of like origami, and Frey could put it in his pocket.
To us, when we hear a story like this, it automatically conjures images of advanced nanotechnology, or perhaps a material science where they had an ability to create a lightweight material that could be folded into smaller dimensions and then could be unfolded into a much larger dimension.
Ancient astronaut theorists suggest that descriptions of the weapons wielded by the gods also sound like advanced technology.
Odin has Gungnir, the spear of heaven, that is also exemplary of what we would think of as modern technology today. When he would throw this spear, it would automatically hit whatever target he threw it at. And when we think about that today, it sounds identical to some kind of like heat-seeking missile or some guided precision weapon that has these incredible capabilities.
Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, has a variety of special powers. It can be thrown and will always come back to Thor. He can shrink it down to the size of ordinary amulet so he can wear it around his neck. And it can also break anything that it hits.
Curiously, Thor could only use his hammer while wearing a special metal glove.
It's really interesting to note that all these ancient stories around the Norse, these magical imbued objects, weapons and such, they're very similar to things that we can reference today. To me, it sounds like this is misunderstood technology. Ancient people were viewing things, and they didn't have a technological lens for reference.
Is it possible that the Norse gods were not fictional creations, but were instead visitors from another planet? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and suggest there may even be evidence that these beings had a hand in the success of the Vikings. Orkney, Scotland. Here, in an ancient glacial valley, stands a 5,000-year-old megalithic structure known as the Dwarfy Stave. According to the locals, the Vikings who invaded this region claimed the inner chamber served as the home of a dwarf. For the Norse people, the dwarves were not fictional creations, but real entities who inhabited a hidden realm beneath the earth. According to the Eddas, these diminutive beings were created by the gods to craft weapons and technology.
The Old Norse term dvergr, translated by its English cognate dwarf, refers to a kind of supernatural being much lower than the gods that interacts both with them and with us. Their main function in the sagas is to make stuff, whether for the gods or for human beings.
The dwarves are an interesting figure in Norse mythology. They're not gods, but they're not people, and they show up as being very powerful, very magical. And so the gods are constantly interacting with the dwarves. And a lot of the power of the Norse gods is derived from the dwarves.
They're the ones that have an extraordinary ability to create things. Dwarves were described as being the best smiths. When the gods need to have things created, they go to the dwarves. These were the creators of these most important elements of the Norse Viking world. Things like Freyr's ship and Odin's spear and Thor's hammer